Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today we're going to talk about day 2 of the Gwyneth Paltrow trial versus Anderson versus Paltrow, and also Paltrow versus Anderson because she's filed a counterclaim. Let's head on down to the beach and talk about that. So I don't have a whole lot of content today other than once again to sort of point out that the management of the case from the plaintiff's perspective has been, to be charitable, haphazard. Now, I have said before that I have the smartest group of viewers on YouTube, and you prove that all the time with your comments. Let's look at a couple of those. Lillian says, I agree with your take on the opening statements, finding the plaintiff's attorney kind of discombobulated and Paltrow's attorney better prepared. I also prefer to listen to the trial without commentary. It amazes me that from time to time I actually nail what other people think about trials. I always think maybe I'm being a bit too critical, but obviously Lillian agrees with my analysis of the opening statements. But if I was muted in my criticism, Bruce certainly doesn't feel constrained by decorum to limit his criticisms to those I expressed. He said that it was an embarrassment and that he would hate to be paying these people and he would be embarrassed to be represented by these attorneys based on their performances so far. And I have to agree with him here. As you can see, it looks to me like everybody else found that opening statement by the plaintiff to be as painful as I did. And even some of the people found the defense opening statement a little bit off-putting. And I think the gentleman's mannerisms are such that he may sort of strike a chord on some people. But I do think he has the better arguments. And I'm a plaintiff's guy. So let's take a look at some of the testimony from the doctor. And I'll explain why he gets away with this and what it really means.
Okay, and what are the types of patients' problems do you see? For example, brain injury?
Definitely. Athletic injuries, sports, concussions, automobile, and motor vehicle injury. We diagnose and treat a fair number of people with other neurologic conditions like multiple sclerosis, strokes, dementia, a lot of degenerative problems in people's spines, disc herniations, those types of things.
And, what about rib injuries or injuries to the torso? Do you see many patients like that?
Okay, that was a 9.5-second period of dead air, and that's not a good thing. Now, that segment of dead air was before the jury was in, when he was just trying to show that he was a qualified expert. But now he's standing up at the lectern and letting numerous seconds pass before he even asks a question. That's not good for the lawyer.
Dr. Gibbe, I have a better photograph or version of the chest x-ray. I'd just like to show that to you briefly so we can see it. This is Plaintiff's Exhibit 31. Okay. What is the importance of this to your opinions, Dr. Gibbe?
This was an x-ray taken the day after his incident, showing it's a series of images of his ribs. And I think the importance of this is documenting the trauma that he sustained.
And this is where you can tell he's an experienced expert witness, because watch what he does. When the lawyer doesn't ask the appropriate follow-up, he asks himself if he can go on.
Can I describe that to the jury?
Yes, please. Why is it important?
We lost the image.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'll put it back up.
And once again, more technical ineptitude because he can't seem to work the visuals in this case. He's really coming off as unprepared.
Do the rib fractures indicate that Dr. Sanderson or Terry Sanderson was hit from the rear and from the side? And why?
So I think that's, you know, one of the really the core questions of this case. It doesn't seem to be any dispute that there was a collision. It doesn't seem to be any dispute that there were injuries. Dr. Sanderson experienced enough trauma to break ribs and cause a concussion. Then the question is, was this something that he caused or the defendant caused? And based upon my analysis of the x-rays and the reports from the witness, Craig, who was there, I think it's very unlikely that this would have been caused by Terry running into Gwyneth Paltrow. First of all, when you're skiing, your knees would be bent, your arms would.
Okay, so this is an indication that they did not prepare the witness well. They've drawn an objection here because he's testifying basically to what happens when he's skiing, and he's not been identified as an expert in skiing. He's been identified as an expert in brain injury and that sort of thing. So they just haven't done a good job here with this. He's being asked if the injuries can tell us what kind or how the accident occurred. Well, there are certainly some situations where the injuries can tell you how the accident occurred. For example, if you've got somebody who had a negligent discharge from a firearm, you have an entry wound and an exit wound, and you can pretty much tell how the accident occurred, or at least from what direction things happened. In the situation where you're looking at rib fractures, it essentially asks this doctor to marry up the testimony of the witnesses, and of course that testimony is cherry-picked, as the defense brings out later on in cross-examination. He's asked to review that testimony and marry it up with the physical findings and offer an opinion that it was Sanderson who was hit by Paltrow. Now, that in and of itself is not unusual. You have to understand that when you employ an expert witness, and his methodology and his opinions are based on science, that he's going to be able to offer those opinions in most cases. Now, the judge in this case has excluded certain testimony about functional MRIs from one of the plaintiff's expert witnesses. But what I want you to pay attention to here is the slow pace of how some of these questions get asked and some of them get answered. And then later on, he makes a comment about one of the defense expert witnesses and ridiculously says something like, well, that's what he's being paid to find.
Okay, Dr. Stephen Edgley, medical doctor, indicates in his report that none of plaintiff's medical records support his claims that perceived symptoms of cognitive decline are related to the ski collision. How do you respond to the defense's expert on that?
Well, obviously the defense expert has a, he's paid to give a certain storyline. I think the record is very clear that he had changes in his behavior, in his interpersonal relationships, and in his functioning. So I'm not sure how this doctor could claim that there were no symptoms related to the accident.
Now, the good doctor recovered nicely, but he just impeached himself because what he said about the other expert applies equally to him, as we'll find out in a little bit. So how would you grade his presentation skills? I personally think he's a C- presenter. He's got such a plodding pace. From here, we're going to move on to the defense cross-examination. We don't have a lot there, but just a few things to show you. They had I think an associate do the cross-examination. Maybe it's trial training time, trial by fire sort of thing. But I don't think he had done very many of these kinds of cross-examinations, and I doubt if he had ever experienced a very competent, very experienced expert witness, because if he had, he would have structured his questions differently on the deposition, and he would have maintained much more tight control. This is one of those situations, I think, where the defense did a B- job, maybe C+ job, because well, as you'll see, the doctor sort of ran away with it. One thing you learn doing medical malpractice cases is that the longer the other guy's witness stays on the stand, the more he hurts you. So you have to limit what his answers can be, and that means you ask very tight questions. Here we have an example of why you do that and what happens when you don't do that. Watch what happens here.
Whether you've ever testified that seeing those prior reports doesn't help, you need to compare the images side by side. Have you testified to that effect?
I'm not sure I've ever testified that it's of no help, but it is more helpful to have the images, yes.
Okay. Let's go to your deposition transcript 86, lines 5 through 6. And I'll read my question. It says, I see, but you've seen the reports for those images, just not the images themselves. And your answer was, I've seen the reports, but that doesn't help. We need to compare them side by side. You see that?
Yes,
So did you just mean that the reports are not very helpful at all?
correct.
And this was dumb. You never throw a witness like this a lifeline.
So it sounds like the imaging itself can't tell you what happened in the ski collision. My understanding of your testimony is that you don't have an opinion that the imaging itself can say, look, there's a concussion and there's problems in the brain that most certainly date back to that ski collision. Is that correct?
I think the imaging is helpful to exclude certain things. There are issues in the medical record and things that have been raised by defense about infarcts, hypertension, multi-infarct dementia, white matter disease. And I think as you try to have causation of whatever his symptoms were, the MRI is very helpful to exclude certain other comorbidities.
And this is what I mean about the longer you leave him on the stand, the more he can hurt you. The proper thing to do there would have been to move to strike and to ask a yes or no question. I ask you a yes or no question, sir, yes or no. You know, if you want to explain, that's what redirect is for. You keep him limited to what he has said in his deposition, and you do that much more aggressively than is being done here. Let's analyze what we have happening here in this clip. We have a doctor who treated, or at least examined, the patient. Now, he's an expert witness, which means he's paid to be there and offer his opinion. And one thing our defense attorney does quite well here is explain where the doctor's money is coming from in this case, and he does it in a low-key way. It's very good.
You received the materials that you looked over from plaintiff's counsel, correct?
I did.
And also, they hired you to perform your work in this case. Is that correct?
Correct.
And they've paid you for that work. Is that correct?
I don't know if we've been paid or not, but they will, I'm sure.
Right. And you have a fee schedule that lists your various charges for things, including an independent medical exam, which I understand you performed. Is that right?
Yes,
And that charge is $2,500. Is that correct?
correct.
And then your court fees, if you were to appear in court and provide testimony, is $5,000. Is that correct?
Yes, for the entire day.
And then there's other fees like deposition fees and review fees, consultation fees. Is that correct?
Yes.
So this is one of those situations where at the end of the day, the plaintiff gets to put points on the board first. And they put some points up on the board with this witness. I think he did a pretty fair job of defending his positions and defending his opinions. Some of his opinions were limited by the court. I really like this trial judge. He is a by-the-book trial judge. He has good control over the courtroom, and he's maintaining good courtroom decorum. someone should probably tell Gwyneth Paltrow to
Well,
quit frowning
this is
so
where
much
probably
and to relax and realize that her time is coming. She is going to get an opportunity to answer some of this stuff. And so when you make a face and frown and that sort of thing, when something the other guy says hurts your case, it just underscores to the jury how much it hurts your case. So even when somebody has, kicked you dead in the seat, you have to be careful about going, ugh, when they do that, because it comes across to the jury. And again, if you have an opportunity to do something nice for someone today, please take a moment to do that. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time down here at the beach. If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.